Welcome to the In the Course Show. I'm your host, Mr. B. Today we have a very exciting show for you. But first, before we jump into everything, there's some breaking news. There is on the economy and the Trump tariffs. There's some updates on that. Apparently, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is holding a press conference where he is talking about, the updates on the tariffs that's been posed on China. And I think he explains his philosophy. So let's jump right into it and see what he has to say about that.
White House and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Thank you, Senator.
Over the next few weeks, many of them have already come to Washington. What President Trump is referring to is the ability for tariff revenue to give income tax relief. And I think there's a very good chance that we will see this in the upcoming tax bill. The president campaigned on no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, and the restoring interest deductibility for autos, for American-made autos. So tariff income could be used for tax relief on all of those immediately.
So you think that there is a role for significant tariff revenue in U.S. fiscal policy?
I think that it is something that got put away a long time ago. And I think that tariffs will bring back American manufacturing and generate substantial revenues.
On manufacturing, we've seen some pretty grisly surveys this month from the Philly Fed, which saw the biggest drop since May of 2020, and the Dallas Fed, similar plunging outlook, poor shipping orders. What are American manufacturers not understanding about your push for onshoring in the U.S.?
Well, I think I was in the investment business 35 years, and I learned to ignore the survey data and look at the actual data, and the actual data has been quite good. The job data is good. Americans keep spending. And as Caroline said, we have these incredible commitments to bring manufacturing back on shore with record investment by domestic corporations and foreigners who want to come into the U.S.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The Chinese continue to say that the U.S. and China are not engaged in any consultation or negotiation on tariffs. You recently said you've talked to your counterpart, but more about, quote, traditional things like financial stability. So can you clarify, is the administration talking to Beijing specifically about tariffs or not?
Well, we're not going to talk about who's talking to whom, but I think that over time we will see that the Chinese tariffs are unsustainable for China. I've seen some very large numbers over the past few days that show if these numbers stay on, Chinese could lose 10 million jobs very quickly. And even if there is a drop in the tariffs, that they could lose 5 million jobs. So remember that we are the deficit country. They sell almost 5 times more goods to us than we sell to them. So the onus will be on them to take off these tariffs. They're unsustainable for them.
And they are saying you guys are not talking about it. So is that true?
Look, they have a different form of government. They're playing to a different audience. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty again of who's talking to whom. But as I said, I believe for the Chinese, these tariffs are unsustainable.
And very quickly, 2 days ago, you said you didn't know if President Trump had spoken to Xi Jinping. Do you know now?
Again, I would say Caroline and I have a lot of jobs around the White House, running the switchboard in one of them.
Bloomberg, go ahead. Secretary Bessent, thank you so much for being here this morning. You've talked about the importance of giving investors certainty when it comes to the market, yet the Trump administration is continuing to negotiate several complex trade deals in a very sort of compressed time frame. When do you expect you'll be able to give the market some certainty around those deals? Do you have a deadline? Is it the 90-day pause? What are we looking at here?
Good question. And I think one thing that has been a little disconcerting for the markets is, President Trump creates what I would call strategic uncertainty in the negotiations. So he is more concerned about getting the best possible trade deals for the American people. We had 4 years of bad deals for decades of unfair trading, and we are going to the unwind those and make them fair. What we are doing is we've created a process. I think the aperture of uncertainty will be narrowing. And as we start moving forward, announcing deals, then there will be certainty. But certainty is not necessarily a good thing in negotiating.
Mr. Secretary, last night there were reports on the administration sort of walking back a little bit on the auto tariffs. Can you sort of just elaborate on that decision there and what we can expect going forward, and why sort of the shift in those auto tariffs?
Well, President Trump has had meetings with both domestic and foreign auto producers, and he's committed to bringing back auto production to the U.S. So we want to give the automakers a path to do that quickly, efficiently, and create as many jobs as possible.
Jasmine. Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you, Secretary. Back from China, does the administration anticipate supply chain shocks or supply shocks coming now that cargo shipments from China are significantly down? And if so, are there plans in the process of how to address that?
I wouldn't think that we would have supply chain shocks, and I think retailers have managed their inventory in front of this. I speak to dozens of companies, sometimes daily, but definitely weekly, and they know that President Trump is committed to fair trade and have planned accordingly.
And then second question, can you outline the timeline for when you think some of these deals, particularly with your Asian countries like India, Japan, South Korea, you may have an announcement?
I'm glad you brought up our Asian trading partners and allies. They have been the most forthcoming in terms of doing the deals. As I mentioned, Vice President Vance was in India last week. I think that he and Modi made some very good progress. So I could see some announcements on India. I could see the contours of a deal with the Republic of Korea coming together. And then we've had substantial talks with the Japanese.
Andrea?
Secretary Besson, just continuing on the path of the sort of like progress. You said yesterday, I think, that it was could happen as early as this week or possibly next week. Can you give us a bit of a timetable? And then I wanted to ask about South Korea specifically. They've said that they probably won't be able to make a comprehensive deal until early July because of their elections. Japan also has elections. And to what extent are domestic factors complicating your efforts? Canada just had an election. Are you seeing that you might have to think about delaying the 90 days?
Well, I would actually take the opposite tack, that I think from our talks that these governments actually want to have the framework of a trade deal done before they go into elections to show that they have successfully negotiated with the United States. So we are finding that they are actually much more keen to come to the table, get this done, and then go home and campaign on it.
Sean?
I'm sorry, did you have a comment on whether it's something could happen this week or next week? For a deal. So, you said yesterday.
Again, I think that we are very close on India. And in India, just a little inside baseball, in India, in a funny way, is easier to negotiate with than many other countries because they have very high tariffs and lots of tariffs. So it's much easier to confront the direct tariffs when, as we go through these unfair trade deals that have been put in over decades, that the non-tariff trade barriers can be much more insidious and also harder to detect. So a country like India, which has the posted and ready tariffs, it's much easier to negotiate with them. So I think the India negotiations are moving well.
Sean?
Hi, Mr. Secretary. So it was reported this morning that Amazon will soon display a little number next to the price of each product that shows how much the Trump tariffs are adding to the cost of each product. So isn't that a perfect crystal clear demonstration that it's the American consumer and not China who is going to have to pay for these policies?
I will take this since I just got off the phone with the president about Amazon's announcement. This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years? And I would also add that It's not a surprise because, as Reuters recently wrote, Amazon has partnered with a Chinese propaganda arm. So this is another reason why Americans should buy American. It's another reason why we are onshoring critical supply chains here at home to shore up our own critical supply chain and boost our own manufacturing here.
Is Jeff Bezos still a Trump supporter?
Look, I will not speak to the president's relationships with Jeff Bezos, but I will tell you that this is certainly a hostile and political action by Amazon. And Secretary, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I would also add that the bringing down the terrible Biden inflation has been a priority for the first 100 days of the Trump administration, and President Trump has done a great job of leading that since January 20th. Interest rates, mortgage rates are down, gasoline and energy prices are down. We're expecting the further decreases. And as Caroline said, the big tax on consumers that goes unnoticed is deregulation or regulation, and we are deregulating and bringing that down. So, from a household income point of view, we would expect real purchasing increases. We've seen them over the first 100 days, and we would expect that to accelerate. We are doing peace deals, trade deals, tax deals, and deregulating. And the deregulation is a longer lead time, but I think by the third and fourth quarters, that's really going to kick in.
Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. A question for you and Secretary Bessent. We talk a lot about volatility and uncertainty in the marketplace, and the president has stated all along that he's more concerned about mainstream America, the American worker. You just talked about deregulation and this entire fair trade and reciprocals. What is your message to the American people in terms of letting them get through this disturbance and the outcome being greater and a greater good for the American worker, the American people, the American families?
I would say trust in President Trump. There's a reason he was reelected to this office. It's because of the historic success of his economic formula in the first term. And as I laid out at the beginning of the briefing, and the secretary has talked about, and the president talks about every day, there's a proven formula that works. Massive deregulation, energy independence, and tax cuts, which are coming. And the secretary is working very hard on that with our counterparts on Capitol Hill. If you want to talk about that, that's a huge deal to put more money back into the pockets of hardworking Americans. As for the fair trade deals the president is trying to negotiate, he's not just righting the wrong of the mess that he inherited from the past 4 years of the Biden administration. This is a mess that has been created for the past 4 decades that has sold out the middle class, that has moved jobs overseas. You think about our heartland, middle America, what towns used to look like, what they look like today. President Trump wants to restore the golden age, and it's a process to do that. And that process is underway, but he's put together a fantastic trade team. Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick, Jamieson Greer, all working incredibly hard on this effort 24/7. But tax cuts are coming, and that's key. And Mr. Secretary, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's really a three-legged stool in the economic policy. It's trade, it's tax, and it's deregulation. So we are in the midst of addressing, as Caroline said, these long-term trade imbalances. The tax bill is going much better than I would have thought when I took office on January 28th, and that's through President Trump's leadership. That Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune are united. Speaker Johnson, we had a very good meeting yesterday with somebody called the Big Six, NEC Director Kevin Hassett, myself, Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, Committee Chairman Jason Smith, and Senator Crapo. And the tax bill is moving forward. It is going to give permanence to the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act, which will, back to the question on certainty, it will give American business certainty, it will give American people certainty. And then President Trump is also adding the things for working Americans that is talked about earlier: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, making auto payments deductible. So that will substantially address the affordability crisis. And the other thing that I would note, and back to data, is that the Vanguard, one of the largest money management firms in America, said that over the past 100 days, 97% of Americans haven't done a trade, And in fact, individual investors have held tight while institutional investors have panicked. So individual investors trust individual investors trust President Trump.
Megan in the back.
Thank you. Can you detail for us exactly what we should expect as far as relief on the auto tariffs front? And then further, Mr. Secretary, should we expect other industries to also get relief the way we've now seen for auto and tech as well?
I'm not going to go into the details of the auto tariff relief, but I can tell you that it will go substantially toward reshoring American auto manufacturing. And again, the goal here is to bring back the high quality industrial jobs to the U.S. President Trump is interested in the jobs of the future, not the jobs of the past. We don't need to necessarily have a booming textile industry like where I grew up again, but we do want to have precision manufacturing and bring that back. And another important, very important function of this that does not get talked about enough is national security. President Trump, his overriding the concern and belief is that economic security is national security is economic security. And we saw during COVID that our supply chains got cut off. And we need to bring back a lot of those supply chains, whether it's in semiconductors, medicines, the steel, and we have to onshore those. So it's a combination of making trade free and fair and remedying this gaping national security hole that he was left with.
I would just add, Megan, the president will sign the executive order on auto tariffs later today, and we will release it as we always do. Go ahead.
Secretary, any updates on the negotiation with the European Union, and is it hard to negotiate with the European Union?
Pardon?
Do you have any updates on the negotiation with the European Union?
I'm involved in the Asian negotiations. My observation goes all the way back to Henry Kissinger's statement, when I call Europe, who do I call? So we're negotiating with a lot of different interests. Some of the European countries have put on an unfair digital service tax on our big internet provider. France and Italy, other countries, Germany and Poland don't have that. So we want to see that unfair tax of one of America's great industries removed. So it's going to be a give and take. So they have some internal matters to decide before they can engage in an external negotiation.
Edward.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Mr. Secretary, so contacts I have in the business community say that they're basically frozen for long-term investment because of the uncertainty around tariffs. How long do you think President Trump has to make a deal before there's damage to the economy?
Look, I think that what we're seeing is that business leaders, they've gone into a pause, and I think we're going to give them great certainty on this tax bill. And I think over the next couple of weeks, as I said, we have 18 important trading relationships. We'll put China to the side. 17 they are in motion. And then, as I said yesterday, I think there's a very good chance we're going to get this tax bill done. And the tax bill is going to be very powerful for domestic U.S. investment. So what we are going to do, one of the most powerful parts of President Trump's 2017 tax bill was full expensing of equipment. We are going to make that, as President Trump said in his speech to Congress, that will be retroactive to January 20th. The other thing that we are looking to add is full expensing for factories. So bring your factory back. You can fully expense the equipment and the building. We will couple that with deregulation, cheap energy, and regulatory certainty, and that will continue to make the U.S. the greatest destination for domestic and foreign investment.
And the president, well, if I can follow, just the president said that world leaders would like to meet with him in Rome, in Vatican City, about trade. Other than President Zelensky, who did the president meet with, and about trade, and when could we get some of those deals?
The president met with President Zelensky, as you know, which we talked about, and the president continues to be engaged with his fellow leaders around the world in the European Union. You've seen many of them visit the White House. I want to harp on, in closing, the point the secretary just made. On the campaign trail, the president promised the American public that he was going to make America the best country in the world to do business again. The lowest taxes, lowest regulation, lowest energy costs of anywhere in the world. And if you do business in the United States, you won't pay a tariff, you won't pay a price. That's not just good for companies around the world, but it's good for the American worker. That's what this team is focused so hard on every day. We have work to do. The golden age of America is underway. But as I pointed out in the beginning, there's a lot of reason for the American consumer, the American CEO, the American small business owner to be confident and optimistic about this president and where we're headed. So you will hear more from the president himself later this evening. He is traveling to Michigan, as you all know. He'll make a stop at the Air Force Base with Governor Whitmer, and then we will head to a rally tonight where you'll hear more from him directly. So we'll see you in Michigan. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, you've been listening to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Welcome back after top of the hour right now. We've been watching this news conference, which was scheduled, I think, to tout what they consider to be the president's accomplishments, economic accomplishments.
Doing it all week.
For the first 100 days. Yesterday was immigration, today the economy. No deals were announced today, no trade deals. I think it's possible investors had been waiting or anticipating something might be announced from the podium today, but that did not happen. The one fairly big piece of news that did happen, though, was that the Treasury Secretary was asked about a report in Punchbowl News that Amazon is going to start posting on its site the additional cost to each product that comes from the president's tariffs.
We're going to stop right here and respond to this particular point. Yes, Amazon is trying to undermine what President Trump is doing by making him look bad in the eyes of the consumers. Because Amazon is an import of the products, they are essentially the ones who pay for the products that get imported into the United States, the ones that they pay to have made abroad. So now a lot of companies can choose to absorb the cost, or they can choose to pass the cost on to the consumer. This is obviously going to affect Amazon's business model a lot, because as they're importing, the cost of these imports coming from various parts of the world is now, especially in China, is now going to make the cost of the products more expensive for the consumer. So now Amazon don't necessarily have a competitive edge from a price standpoint, because now the products that they're selling, that they're importing from abroad, is now more expensive. And so now what they're trying to do for all their faithful customers is they're essentially trying to point the blame to say, hey, here are the effects of the political policies of President Trump. The cost was this, and now we're going to show you the jumping cost. As you make a purchase online, we're going to show you the jumping cost in that. So Amazon's, in a way, just trying to make Trump look bad. Now, on the flip side, I actually happen to think that this guy, Scott Bessent, is a really brilliant guy. This is the guy that helped George Soros make $1 gazillion. I mean, this guy really watches market trends, has been in the market for over 40 years, I think you mentioned, and really has a pulse on what's going on in the market. So if there is a capable guy that you want on your side making policies that benefit your country, it would definitely be that guy. He knows what he's talking about. And a lot of people try to undermine him and try to undermine his wisdom around that. I think they've stated the goals. The goals is to bring manufacturing back into the country. There is no easy way to do that, because for years we've gone ahead and made a global economy the standard. So now a lot of the products that we get, although cheaper, come from abroad, which means we had to sacrifice jobs in order to get cheaper products. But the question is, if you don't have jobs and you don't have a strong middle class, you don't have a strong people to tax, getting cheaper products isn't going to matter if you don't have a sustainable job that allows you to have disposable income to afford those products. So then it's going to have an effect, and it already does. So Trump's idea is, let's change the whole global approach. Let's go back to prioritizing our citizens. Let's make sure we have critical infrastructure being manufactured here. You know, things like our medicines and, you know, our steel, should there be a conflict, we need those operations in-house, because if we get into conflict with the countries we're importing those things from, they can restrict us from getting it, and now we're at a disadvantage when we need those things the most. And then let's collect these tariffs for those places who are charging us unfair tariffs, and let's redistribute the tariffs so that Americans don't have to pay taxes. I think they said Americans under $200,000 of annual income don't have to pay taxes. I think that's where he's going. And that once he does that, it's going to make it so crazy for Republicans, because if that policy goes into play and people are starting to see by staying to that policy, they don't have to pay taxes, or a major portion of their check is not going to be taken from the government. And then the reduction of wasteful spending and all these different things. Trump is trying to make a more lean government, and he's also trying to create jobs. And at the same time, he is trying to give tax relief to the people. That's a win on all fronts. I don't know whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent. Who doesn't want lower taxes? Who doesn't want to have a stronger job market? And who doesn't want to be able to be more competitive in terms of their dollars buying power and their ability to afford a better lifestyle than the ones they currently have? It's a win. And for the opposition, the people who don't want to see Trump win, they're going to make it look bad. They're going to make him look bad with their assessment of what he's doing. They're going to try to point people to look at the pain points. Oh, the market's not doing too good. Well, the market's going to correct itself. Well, they're going to make him look bad in the sense of saying, well, he hasn't closed any deals in the first 100 days. Guys, it's only been 100 days, and he's well on his way to closing deals, but obviously he wants to make sure he closes the right deal so that it's more advantageous for the American people. And from the tax revenue that they're collecting, the import tax revenue that they're collecting, which I've heard is in the realms of $15 billion a day, he's then reallocating it so that it offsets the income taxes that the IRS was collecting from the citizens who make a certain amount of money. That's a win. To me, a lot of people may not see the bigger picture, but when you simplify things down to what I've just stated, it is definitely a winning strategy that he's implementing. Now, there are pain points along the way, but looking at the bigger picture, this is a winning strategy. Let's hope he's able to get this across the board. Obviously, it requires some cooperation with the countries and people getting deals done, but they seem like they're making good progress with that. Again, this is just my take on that announcement. It's Trump's first 100 days in office, and he seems to be pretty proud of the work he's done. That doesn't mean I approve or I agree with every policy position he takes. There are some things I don't necessarily see eye to eye on, but, for those things that do make sense, I think he should be applauded. All right, that's it for me. If you guys are not connected to the Inner Core Show, I pray that you go ahead, like and subscribe by pushing the button below and staying connected. And also let your voice be heard. Share this video, comment, and also weigh in on, the updates and the content that we're making. All right, guys, have a good one.